Union showdown in Wisconsin enters day 11. The governor is holding strong in his plan to strip certain public sector unions of their right to bargain collectively. This would be a huge step in freeing the people of Wisconsin from the exceptional mediocrity that unions have enshrined in their public schools. But this problem is not unique to Wisconsin. All of America is under siege from public sector unions, and the battles are being waged in more states around the country. With us now, Pacific Research Institute scholar Stephen Greenhut, author of Plunder, how public employee unions are raiding treasuries, controlling our lives, and bankrupting the nation. Stephen, welcome to Freedom Watch. Where did anybody get the idea that the right to have the government bargain collectively with union heads is somehow a national or a constitutional or a fundamental or a natural right?
Well, it's an incredible idea when you realize, though, that they already have so many protections that people in the private sector don't have. But the Wisconsin Republicans are correct. Targeting collective bargaining is the main thing. It's not just the costs that we're getting from these ridiculous pension deals. And in California, we've got 15,000 government workers, retirees who are earning more than $100,000 a year, and just amazing looting of the Treasury. But it's destroying public services. You can't have any reform because of the power of the unions and collective bargaining.
There was a time, and you and I are old enough to remember these days, when public service, whether you were the janitor or the governor, was considered a sacrifice, and public servants made less than their colleagues did for comparable work in the private sector. That is no longer the case today. And why is that no longer the case today?
Well, thanks to collective bargaining, unions are able to elect their bosses. And I've seen it covering, for a newspaper covering local government, and seeing where union members are on both sides of the bargaining table. The taxpayer doesn't have a chance. And that's how we've got in California a $500 billion unfunded pension liability. That's the debt to pay for these pensions. And then the services are being depleted because we just can't reform anything. You can't consider privatization. You can't consider any of the normal things that one might do to save money.
All right. The presence of the pupils in the classroom is guaranteed by demographics. The presence of the tax dollar to be spent on those pupils is guaranteed by the government and by the taxpayers. There's no competition. We're forced to pay for public schools whether we want them or not. How bad are they?
Well, in Los Angeles, the mayor there, who's a liberal Democrat and longtime union supporter, says the education situation is the new civil rights battle of our time, and he blames the teachers as being the teachers union as being the main roadblock to reform. And they're arguing in Los Angeles over whether 30% or 50% is the dropout rate. Imagine if any private sector business, if only 30 or 50% of the products you provided failed. Can you imagine? It's just really unconscionable.
That's why I argue that competition is the key, because these unions could not compete against the private sector if people were free to choose whether to spend their tax dollars on the public schools or to take that money and put them into the for-profit private schools that would pop up all over the place. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. They won't allow any sort of, the teachers' unions won't allow any sort of competition. And we see in everything, competition is the key to creating better public services, not some command and control system, monopoly system. And the unions won't allow any sort of competition. If any private sector business had to have the work rules that we found in any public agencies, they would go out of business. But yeah, the government can't go out of business, so we get these huge debts that we're just tax increases on our grandchildren.
Stephen Greenhut, thank you for joining us. Thomas Jefferson warned that democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give to those who would not. Is that at the heart of this union battle? After this. Are we turning into a nation of takers instead of a nation of makers? Nearly half of all Americans, nearly half, live in a household in which someone in that house receives some government benefits of some sort. Take a look at this chart. More Americans are in households that receive government benefits than at any time in the last 30 years. And an estimated 45% of all American households pay no federal income taxes. So are these union showdowns over benefits part and parcel of the whole gimme entitlement culture plaguing our country? That's what my next guest says. Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, for the New York Post and author of a fabulous piece on this yesterday, Michael Goodwin. Michael, it's a pleasure. Welcome here.
Thank you, Judge.
What has happened in our culture where people claim they have the right to the government taking care of them?
Well, look, I think it is a manifestation of the dependency culture. I call it the entitlement culture. Of course, we have a series of programs called entitlements, and the very idea of it is that it's mine. I want it. Not just that I want it or I'm going to go get it. It's I'm entitled to it. And I love ambition. I love desire. But the sense of being entitled to what you want is a whole different thing, particularly when you feel entitled to get it from the government, which is your neighbors.
Now, you and I don't agree on everything, but I think we agree on this. Our rights are natural. They come from our humanity. We are born with them. We have the right to speech and travel and association by virtue of our existence. But things like health care, broccoli, a membership at the gym, they're not rights, they're goods. They're the opposite of rights. We're not born with them. We have to go out and get them. When we're children, our parents give them to us. When we're older, we earn and save and acquire them ourselves.
Right.
How do these people confuse the two? When I listen to those union teachers in Madison, Wisconsin, God bless the governor for his tenacity, they're acting as if they had a natural right to their jobs, to their benefits, and to this collective bargaining.
Well, look, the Declaration says we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It doesn't guarantee happiness, just the chance at it. And I think that that's where the confusion has come in. We've gotten to expect everything will be given to us by government. And if it doesn't give it to us, we're going to get a new government. And I think we're sort of chasing our tails on this because we're never going to reach satisfaction because, as Thomas Jefferson said, any government that can give you everything you need is big enough to take away everything you have. And so that's the problem with taking from the government. I think these unions are an example of the culture. They're by far not the only ones. We have corporations in the same mentality.
You are striking at the better angel of my nature by quoting my favorite president, Thomas Jefferson. But even a president that I've criticized harshly, FDR, said collective bargaining has no place in the government.
Sure.
I think even JFK
Right.
would be shocked at what's going on in Madison, Wisconsin today, and the Democratic Party supporting the unions saying these people are entitled as a matter of right to health care from day one on the job till the day of death, retirement at 80% of your benefits after 20 years on the job.
Right. And Democrat legislators running away rather than facing up to these issues. I mean, that's the one I think that would shock JFK, LBJ, FDR.
Where do you think that goes? Do you think that they are, these Democratic senators in Wisconsin, sorry, last question, we're going to go to London in a minute, these Democratic senators in Wisconsin who fled the state.
Right.
Do you think their constituents want them to do it, or do you think they've killed themselves politically when they return?
Well, look, I think as a symbol, it's horrible. And I think that eventually it will become one of those moments you'll say, those people? I can't vote for those people. Now, there will clearly be some who will support this, but I think for the independent voters, and Wisconsin is one of those swing states.
Right.
So for independent voters, I think this looks like a disaster.
Michael Goodwin, thanks very much. Pleasure to have you here. Now, breaking news out of London. A court has ruled today that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can be extradited to Sweden to face sex crimes allegations and interrogations by prosecutors there. With me now by phone is Julian Assange's lawyer, Mark Stevens. Mark, we know it's late in the day, and we appreciate very much you joining us. Well, what did the court do today, and what reasons did it give for its decision?
Well, basically, it said that Julian could be extradited. This is a first instance ruling. Of course, there are appeals to be had, both to the High Court and the Supreme Court. But it gave some very interesting findings of fact. It found that Sweden has secret trials in relation to sex crimes and alleged sex crimes, and also said that he would be held incommunicado without access to a lawyer. And I think that will offend the notions of justice and fair trials of judges in America, but also in the United Kingdom. And so I think that we're set fair for a reasonable result on appeal.
Mark, is it true that no formal criminal charges alleging sexual improprieties have even been filed yet against Julian? That, in fact, the reason for the extradition is because prosecutors want to talk to him, something he offered to do with them before the extradition process even began?
That's absolutely right, Judge. I mean, the prosecutor says, well, he didn't turn up at a meeting that I unilaterally said should take place on the 8th of October last year. He has, both before and after that date, said that he would meet at a mutually convenient time, and the prosecutor has not taken him up on that option, which frankly seems to beg a belief, because if she has any concern about the allegations that these women have made, or indeed about justice and resolution of these investigations, then the appropriate thing to do is to undertake an investigation. She says she has to interview him. Well, he's ready, willing and able to meet her in London anytime she wants to come here. She's too afraid to come because she knows that she'll get cross-examined in an English court, and she can't withstand that cross-examination.
Last question. What happens next in Britain?
Next is that there's an appeal here. We expect that that will be resolved in July. We expect the Supreme Court hearing to be held sometime in November.
Mark Stevens, late in the day in London. Thanks very much for joining us with this breaking news.
Thank you, Judge.
The U.S. Treasury will get $14 billion less in tax revenue over the next several years because it's letting one of its favorite companies off the hook. Find out which company the government is playing favorites with. See if you can guess which it is. Next.
Goldman Sachs.